Imagine walking into a room and noticing what everyone else overlooks. You notice the hesitation behind someone's words. You notice the energy that changes when a certain person enters. You notice patterns, inconsistencies, small details, and the things people never say out loud. And sometimes, being able to see what others miss can make you feel different. Not because something is wrong with you, because you're paying attention at a deeper level. Intelligent women don't always need more information. They often have the ability to notice differently. They listen beyond the words. They observe behavior instead of promises. They recognize patterns before those patterns become problems. And most importantly, they learn to trust what they consistently see rather than what they desperately want to believe. Today, I want to explore 8 things intelligent women notice that others often miss, and how becoming more aware can change the way you think, choose, communicate, ultimately live your life. One of the clearest signs of intelligence is the ability to see beyond isolated moments and recognize patterns. Anyone can react to one event. Someone says something rude, someone cancels plans, someone suddenly becomes distant, someone makes a mistake, and you can immediately decide what it means. But an intelligent woman understands that one moment does not always tell the whole story. She pays attention to what happens repeatedly because patterns often reveal what individual moments try to hide. A single bad day does not necessarily define a person. Everyone has difficult days. Everyone becomes tired, distracted, emotional, or overwhelmed. An intelligent woman doesn't rush to judge someone because of one imperfect moment. Instead, she watches. She gives people room to be human while quietly paying attention to what happens next. Does the behavior repeat? Does the apology lead to changed behavior? Does kindness disappear when there is nothing to gain? Does respect remain when there is disagreement? Does someone consistently keep their promises, or do they only make beautiful promises when they want something? These questions reveal much more than one conversation ever could. This is where observation becomes powerful. An intelligent woman doesn't allow one impressive moment to erase 10 disappointing ones. She doesn't allow one apology to make her forget a repeated pattern. She doesn't allow one compliment to convince her that someone has good intentions if their actions consistently communicate something different. She looks at the whole picture. This doesn't mean she becomes suspicious of everyone. It means she becomes thoughtful about what she accepts as evidence. Imagine someone who constantly tells you how much they value you, but repeatedly ignores your boundaries. Their words may sound beautiful. The pattern is telling you something different. Or imagine someone who occasionally criticizes you, but consistently supports your growth, respects your decisions, and shows up when it matters. One negative moment may not define them either. The intelligent response is not to judge immediately. It is to observe consistently. Patterns are especially important because people can control individual moments. Someone can be charming for an afternoon. Someone can say exactly what you want to hear. Someone can behave perfectly when they know they are being watched. But consistency is much harder to fake over time. Eventually, behavior becomes a language of its own. You begin noticing how someone treats people who cannot benefit them. You notice how they behave when they are frustrated. You notice whether they take responsibility when they are wrong. You notice whether their kindness depends on receiving something in return. You notice whether they respect people who have less power than they do. These details may seem small, but together they create a picture. And intelligent women learn to read the picture instead of becoming distracted by individual colors. This ability also changes the way you understand relationships. Instead of asking, "What did they say today?" you begin asking, "What have they consistently shown me?" That question can protect you from emotional confusion. Because sometimes people become attached to potential. They see one beautiful side of someone and build an entire future around it. They remember the good conversation, the thoughtful gesture, the intense connection, and they use those moments to explain away everything that doesn't fit. But intelligence requires the courage to look at the complete pattern. Maybe someone is wonderful when everything goes their way, but becomes disrespectful when challenged. Maybe they are affectionate when they want attention, but disappear when you need support. Maybe they apologize beautifully, but repeat the same behavior a week later. Pattern matters. And the same principle applies to yourself. An intelligent woman doesn't only observe other people. She observes her own patterns. She notices when she repeatedly chooses people who are emotionally unavailable. She notices when she keeps postponing her goals whenever someone enters her life. She notices when criticism triggers an immediate need to prove herself. She notices when she becomes anxious because someone has not responded, even though nothing has actually happened. Instead of judging herself, she becomes curious. She asks, "What keeps repeating here?" That question can lead to tremendous personal growth. Maybe the problem isn't that you keep meeting the wrong people. Maybe you're repeatedly ignoring the same warning signs because you want the relationship to work. Maybe you're not lacking confidence. Maybe you've trained yourself to seek approval before trusting your own judgment. Maybe you're not confused about what someone is doing. Maybe you're uncomfortable accepting what their behavior is already telling you. Patterns bring clarity. They turn vague feelings into information. When you notice something once, you can question it. When you notice it repeatedly, you can investigate it. When the evidence continues to point in the same direction, you can make a decision. That is emotional intelligence combined with observation. And this ability can prevent you from making decisions based entirely on emotion. Emotions are valuable. They can become overwhelming when they are disconnected from evidence. You may feel intensely attracted to someone, but attraction doesn't automatically mean compatibility. You may feel afraid of losing someone, but fear doesn't automatically mean you should hold on. You may feel guilty about setting a boundary, but guilt doesn't automatically mean the boundary is wrong. Intelligent women learn to separate feelings from facts. They can say, "I feel anxious," while also asking, "What evidence do I actually have?" They can say, "I love this person," while also asking, "What does this relationship consistently look like?" They can say, "I want this opportunity," while asking, "Is this actually aligned with the life I'm trying to build?" That ability to pause is powerful. It creates space between what happens and what you decide. And in that space, wisdom develops. You don't have to react to every moment. You don't have to label every person immediately. You don't have to turn every disagreement into a final judgment. Sometimes you simply need to step back and watch. Watch what happens after the conversation. Watch what happens when you say no. Watch how someone responds when you succeed. Watch how they respond when you need help. Watch whether their behavior changes when they no longer need something from you. Watch whether they respect the boundaries you communicate. Watch whether they celebrate your growth or subtly compete with it. The more you observe, the less you need to guess. And that is one of the quiet advantages of intelligent women. They don't always have to know everything immediately. They are willing to let time reveal information. Time exposes consistency. Time exposes character. Time exposes priorities. Time exposes whether someone's words and actions actually belong together. Don't be afraid to slow down before making conclusions. You don't need to decide what someone means after one conversation. You don't need to determine your entire future from one emotional moment. Give yourself permission to observe. Because when you stop judging individual moments and start studying patterns, you begin seeing people more clearly, understanding yourself more honestly, and making decisions based not on what you hope will happen, on what repeatedly shows up in front of you. Intelligent women understand that communication is much bigger than words. People can say one thing while their tone, behavior, body language, and silence communicate something completely different. That is why a thoughtful woman doesn't only listen to what someone says. She pays attention to what is missing, what changes, what remains unspoken. Sometimes the most important part of a conversation is the hesitation before an answer. Sometimes it is the sudden change in someone's energy. Sometimes it is the subject they keep avoiding. Sometimes it is the way their voice changes when a particular topic comes up. These details may not provide the entire truth, but they provide information. An intelligent woman doesn't immediately assume she knows what someone is thinking. She observes with curiosity rather than judgment. She understands that silence can mean many things. Someone may be tired, uncomfortable, uncertain, distracted, or simply processing their thoughts. Instead of creating a story in her head, she pays attention to patterns and asks thoughtful questions. This is especially important in relationships. Words like "I'm fine" can mean many different things depending on the situation. A person might genuinely be fine, or they might not know how to express what they're feeling. An intelligent woman doesn't force an interpretation. She notices the difference between the words and the energy behind them. She might say, "You seem a little different today. Is everything okay?" But not as an accusation, not as pressure. Simply as an invitation to communicate. That is emotional awareness. Intelligent women also notice what people avoid saying. If someone repeatedly changes the subject whenever responsibility comes up, that tells you something. If someone constantly talks about what other people did wrong, but never acknowledges their own mistakes, that tells you something. If someone says they value honesty, but becomes defensive every time you ask a reasonable question, that tells you something. You don't have to confront every observation. Sometimes you simply need to remember it, because people reveal themselves through what they consistently avoid just as much as through what they openly discuss. This awareness can also help you understand yourself. Sometimes you notice that someone else isn't communicating clearly, but your own emotions are communicating something too. Maybe you feel uncomfortable around someone even though you can't immediately explain why. Instead of dismissing that feeling or treating it as absolute truth, you can become curious about it. What am I noticing? What changed? What happened before I started feeling this way? Is there actual evidence? Or am I reacting to an old experience? That kind of reflection prevents intuition from becoming paranoia. There is a difference between intuition and assumption. Intuition can encourage you to pay attention. Assumption tells you that you already know the answer. An intelligent woman leaves room for both observation and uncertainty. She doesn't need to decode every person in the room. She doesn't need to turn every silence into a hidden message. She simply understands that communication has layers. A person's actions can say, "I care." Their consistency can say, "I don't." Their silence can say, "I need time." Their avoidance can say, "I'm not ready to face this." Their willingness to listen can say, "Your perspective matters to me." And sometimes what a person doesn't say is simply as important as what they do say. The goal is not to become obsessed with reading people. The goal is to become present enough to notice what is actually happening. When you listen carefully, you become less dependent on explanations. You begin recognizing whether someone's behavior matches their words. You notice whether their promises are supported by action. You notice whether they communicate openly when things become difficult or disappear whenever accountability enters the conversation. And this awareness gives you something incredibly valuable. Clarity. You don't have to chase clarity from someone who repeatedly refuses to communicate. You don't have to force someone to explain what their behavior is already demonstrating. You can ask questions, communicate honestly, pay attention to the response, because sometimes the response isn't the words, sometimes it is the willingness to have the conversation at all. And when you learn to listen beyond words, you begin to understand people without needing to control them, observe without becoming suspicious, and recognize the difference between what someone says they value and what their behavior consistently reveals. Intelligent women learn that words can be beautiful, convincing, emotional, and completely disconnected from reality. Someone can tell you they care about you, respect you, support you, or want a future with you, but those words only become meaningful when their behavior consistently supports them. That is why one of the most important things an intelligent woman notices is what people do after they speak. Anyone can make a promise in the right moment. Anyone can say what sounds good. But behavior requires consistency, effort, and accountability. Pay attention to what happens when circumstances change. Does someone still treat you with respect when they are frustrated? Do they keep their word when nobody is checking? Do they show up when there is nothing in it for them? Do they support your growth when your success does not benefit them directly? These moments reveal character. An intelligent woman doesn't become impressed simply because someone knows what to say. She looks for alignment between words and actions. If someone says, "You can trust me," she doesn't need to immediately believe or reject the statement. She watches what happens over time. Trust is built through repeated behavior, not through a single sentence. This mindset can save you from a lot of emotional confusion. Imagine someone constantly telling you that you are important to them. They repeatedly cancel plans, ignore your concerns, and only reach out when they need something. The words may sound reassuring. The behavior creates a different message. Instead of arguing about which message is true, an intelligent woman observes the pattern. She asks herself, what is this person's behavior consistently showing me? That question is powerful because it moves you away from potential and toward reality. You don't have to hate someone to recognize that their actions aren't aligned with your needs. You don't have to call someone a bad person simply because they aren't capable of giving you what you need. Times the truth is simply that their words and behavior don't match what you are looking for, and that is enough information to make a different choice. This principle applies beyond relationships. Watch how people behave toward employees, strangers, service workers, family members, and people who cannot give them anything in return. Someone's character often becomes clearer when there is no reward for being kind. Notice how they react when they make a mistake. Do they take responsibility or immediately search for someone to blame? Do they apologize because they genuinely understand the impact of their actions, or only because they want the conflict to end? Notice how they respond to your success. Are they genuinely happy for you, or do they subtly minimize what you accomplished? Do they celebrate your progress, or do they become uncomfortable when you begin growing beyond the version of yourself they were used to? These details matter. An intelligent woman also observes her own actions. She doesn't demand standards from other people that she refuses to practice herself. If she wants honesty, she becomes honest. If she wants consistency, she becomes consistent. If she wants respect, she learns to communicate respectfully while also protecting her boundaries, because intelligence isn't only about detecting other people's contradictions, it is also about having the courage to examine your own. Sometimes we say we want one thing, but repeatedly choose another. We say we want peace, but continue participating in unnecessary conflict. We say we want healthy relationships, but keep returning to familiar patterns that make us anxious. We say we want growth, but constantly choose comfort. An intelligent woman notices these contradictions without using them as a reason to attack herself. She uses them as information. Behavior is evidence, and evidence helps you make better decisions. You don't need to become cynical. You don't need to assume everyone is lying. You simply become less willing to ignore what you repeatedly observe when someone's words and actions match. Trust becomes easier when they don't. You pay attention. You don't argue with reality just because you prefer a different story. That is emotional maturity. You begin understanding that consistency is one of the clearest forms of communication. A person doesn't have to repeatedly tell you that they care when their behavior already demonstrates it. Likewise, someone can say all the right things if their actions repeatedly create confusion, disappointment, or disrespect. Pattern deserves your attention. The intelligent woman doesn't chase explanations forever. She observes, she listens, she evaluates, and then she chooses based on what she consistently sees rather than what she desperately hopes will be true, because words can create an impression in a moment. Actions create a reputation over time, and when you learn to watch behavior, instead of simply believing promises, you begin seeing people more clearly and making choices with far less confusion. Intelligent women often notice changes in energy before anyone says anything. They can sense when a conversation suddenly feels different, when someone's enthusiasm disappears, when a room becomes uncomfortable, or when a person who was warm yesterday becomes strangely distant today. They don't always know exactly why the energy changed, but they recognize that something changed. This kind of awareness isn't about reading minds. It is about paying attention to the details most people ignore. A person's tone may become shorter. Their eye contact may change. Their responses may become unusually delayed. They may stop asking questions. They may become more defensive. They may laugh, but the laughter doesn't feel genuine. None of these details automatically prove anything, but together they can create a pattern worth noticing. An intelligent woman doesn't immediately turn every change into a negative conclusion. She doesn't say, "They hate me," simply because someone seems quiet. Instead, she becomes curious. What changed? Did something happen? Is this about me, or is something happening in their world? That pause is important because emotional intelligence requires observation without immediate judgment. Sometimes people are simply tired. Sometimes they're dealing with something you know nothing about. Sometimes their energy has nothing to do with you at all. An intelligent woman understands this, which is why she doesn't automatically personalize every shift she notices, but she also doesn't ignore repeated changes. If someone consistently becomes cold whenever you express an opinion, that tells you something. If someone becomes distant whenever you set a boundary, that tells you something. If someone is supportive when you're struggling but uncomfortable when you're succeeding, that tells you something. If someone's kindness disappears whenever they don't get what they want, that tells you something. Energy shifts become meaningful when they repeat around specific situations. This awareness is especially useful in relationships because people often communicate indirectly. Someone may say, "Nothing is wrong," while behaving noticeably differently. Instead of forcing them to confess something, you can give them space while continuing to observe. You can say, "If something is bothering you, I'm here to talk." Then you allow their response to tell you more. You don't have to chase. You don't have to interrogate. You don't have to create a story. You simply remain aware. This is also where intuition becomes valuable. Sometimes you walk into a situation and something feels off. You can't immediately explain it, but you feel a subtle tension. An intelligent woman doesn't automatically treat that feeling as proof, but she doesn't automatically dismiss it either. She investigates. She looks for evidence. She notices whether the feeling disappears when she learns more or becomes stronger as patterns emerge. That is the difference between intuition and fear. Often creates conclusions before evidence appears. Intuition can simply tell you to pay closer attention. Learning this difference can dramatically improve your decision making. You don't need to react to every feeling. You should become curious about recurring ones. Maybe you always feel anxious around someone because they are inconsistent. Maybe you feel drained after certain conversations because you are constantly defending yourself. Maybe you feel relaxed around people who communicate clearly and respect your boundaries. Your body and emotions can provide information. Your mind still needs to evaluate that information carefully. Intelligent women learn to combine awareness with reasoning. They notice the energy shift, then look for the reason. They notice the silence, then consider the context. They notice the behavior. Watch what happens next. They don't need to label someone immediately. They simply collect information. And over time, information becomes clarity. This skill also helps you understand environments. You can walk into a workplace, a social gathering, or a new community and notice how people interact. Who listens when someone speaks? Who constantly interrupts? Who makes jokes at other people's expense? Who seems uncomfortable when someone receives attention? Who genuinely celebrates another person's success? These small interactions reveal the culture of a place. You don't need to analyze every person you meet, but you should remain present enough to notice what the environment is teaching you, because where you spend your time shapes you. If you constantly surround yourself with negativity, manipulation, insecurity, or competition, you may eventually begin thinking that behavior is normal. But when you spend time around people who communicate honestly, support growth, respect boundaries, and celebrate each other's success, your own standards can rise. Awareness gives you the ability to choose your environment instead of simply adapting to whatever environment you enter. And that is one of the quiet strengths of an intelligent woman. She doesn't need to be the loudest person in the room to understand what is happening. She watches. She listens. She notices the small shifts that eventually reveal the larger picture, allowing her to respond with clarity rather than reacting blindly to every change in mood or energy. Intelligent women don't only study the world around them. They also pay attention to what happens inside them. They notice the emotions that appear suddenly, the situations that repeatedly make them uncomfortable, the conversations that leave them feeling drained, and the moments when they become unusually defensive, anxious, or insecure. They understand that emotions are not weaknesses. They are information. When something triggers you, it is easy to blame the person or situation immediately. Someone says something that reminds you of an old experience, and suddenly your reaction becomes much bigger than the moment itself. An intelligent woman learns to pause and ask, "Why did this affect me so strongly?" That question creates awareness. Maybe the comment touched an insecurity you have carried for years. Maybe someone's behavior reminded you of a previous relationship. Maybe you are exhausted and have less emotional capacity than usual. Maybe you are afraid of being rejected, misunderstood, abandoned, or judged. The goal isn't to criticize yourself for having the reaction. The goal is to understand it. Self-awareness gives you the ability to separate what is happening now from what happened before. Without that awareness, old experiences can quietly control new decisions. You may react to someone who hasn't actually hurt you because your mind recognizes a familiar pattern. You may push someone away because you're afraid they will eventually leave. You may become overly defensive because you learned long ago that being vulnerable was unsafe. An intelligent woman doesn't automatically trust every emotional reaction as absolute truth. She listens to the emotion, then investigates it. She asks, "Is this about what is happening right now? Is this connected to something older?" That question can change the way you communicate. Instead of attacking someone, you might explain what you are feeling. Instead of withdrawing completely, you might ask for clarification. Instead of sending an emotional message immediately, you might give yourself time to calm down and understand what you actually want to say. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means refusing to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. Anger can tell you that a boundary may have been crossed. Fear can tell you that something feels uncertain. Jealousy can reveal an insecurity. Sadness can show you that something matters deeply. Anxiety can signal that you need clarity or rest. The emotion provides information. You decide what to do with that information. That is emotional intelligence. Intelligent women also notice patterns in their reactions. Maybe they become anxious whenever someone takes longer to respond. Maybe they feel guilty whenever they say no. Maybe they become uncomfortable whenever they receive praise. Maybe they feel the need to prove themselves whenever someone criticizes them. These patterns are opportunities for growth. Instead of saying, "This is just how I am," they ask, "Where did I learn to respond this way?" That question moves you from identity to possibility. You are not permanently defined by your triggers. You can become aware of them. You can understand them. You can develop healthier responses. You can choose differently, and the more you practice that process, the more freedom you gain. You stop allowing every emotion to become an emergency. You stop assuming every uncomfortable feeling requires immediate action. You become capable of sitting with uncertainty without desperately trying to eliminate it. That is a powerful form of strength. It also changes how you treat other people. When you understand your own triggers, you become less likely to project them onto someone else. You can recognize that your reaction may contain information about your history, not necessarily evidence about their intentions. You can say, "I felt hurt by that," instead of, "You always try to hurt me." You can say, "I need some clarity," instead of creating a story about what someone must be thinking. You can say, "This brought something up for me," instead of pretending nothing happened. That level of honesty creates healthier communication. Self-awareness doesn't make you emotionless. It makes you more intentional. You still feel deeply. You still experience disappointment, excitement, fear, attraction, anger, and sadness. You become less controlled by those emotions because you have learned to understand them. You become the observer as well as the person experiencing the emotion. And when a woman can observe herself clearly, she becomes much harder to manipulate. She knows which buttons people might push because she knows her own buttons. She recognizes when someone is intentionally provoking her. She recognizes when she is reacting from fear rather than values. She recognizes when she needs to pause instead of respond. She doesn't become perfect, she becomes aware, and awareness gives her something incredibly valuable. The ability to choose her response instead of simply repeating an old reaction, especially when pressure, insecurity, or emotional discomfort tries to take control of the moment. Intelligent women have the courage to question what everyone else accepts without thinking. They don't automatically believe something simply because it is popular, traditional, or repeated by people around them. They understand that common does not always mean correct, and popular does not always mean valuable. Their minds naturally ask deeper questions. Why is this considered normal? Who decided this was the only way? Does this actually make sense for me? What happens if I choose differently? That curiosity is one of the qualities that separates independent thinking from simply following the crowd. An intelligent woman doesn't question everything just to be difficult. She questions things because she wants to understand them. She listens to different opinions, considers evidence, and then makes her own judgment. She can respect someone else's perspective without automatically adopting it. This becomes especially important when society creates expectations about how women should behave. There may be pressure to look a certain way, live a certain lifestyle, have a particular relationship, reach certain milestones at a certain age. Make decisions based on what everyone else believes is appropriate. An intelligent woman can step back and ask, "Is this actually what I want?" That question requires courage, because choosing differently can make you uncomfortable. Maybe everyone around you is getting married. You're focused on building your career. Maybe everyone expects you to stay in a relationship because it looks good from the outside, but you know something inside the relationship is no longer healthy. Maybe people tell you that you should accept a certain opportunity because it sounds impressive. Your instincts tell you that it doesn't align with your values. The intelligent response is not to rebel automatically. It is to think independently. You don't reject something because everyone believes it. You don't accept something for the same reason. You investigate, you consider, you decide. That ability becomes even more valuable. in the age of constant information. Every day, you are exposed to opinions, trends, headlines, influencers, advertisements, social media posts, people confidently telling you what you should believe. Intelligent women understand that confidence does not equal truth. Someone can speak with certainty and still be wrong. Someone can have millions of followers and still give poor advice. Something can trend online and still be unhealthy for you. So instead of asking, does everyone believe this? They ask, what evidence supports this? That mindset protects you from manipulation. It also protects you from comparison. Social media can create the illusion that everyone else has figured out life. You see someone's career, relationship, vacation, appearance, home, or achievements and begin wondering why your life doesn't look the same. But an intelligent woman understands that she is seeing a carefully selected portion of someone else's life. She doesn't compare her entire reality to someone else's highlight reel. She questions the story behind the image. She asks whether the lifestyle she is admiring would actually make her happy. That is an important distinction. Sometimes we don't want what someone else we want, what someone else has. We want what we think having it would make us feel. We think success will give us confidence. We think attention will give us security. We think a relationship will give us worth. We think money will automatically give us peace. But intelligent women question those assumptions. They and that external achievements can improve your circumstances without automating your internal world. So they focus on building both. Well, they pursue success was on developing character. They value relationships, want to appreciate beauty while remembering cannot be in a full life. Define a long just one predictive formula. Well, if you think of me, was coming your why, little man. You're one was is probably supreme. As you were going, rather not doing what They may question your priorities. They may tell you that you're making a mistake. They may compare you to someone else. You can listen without surrendering your judgment. You can respect their concern without allowing their opinion to become your decision. You can say, I understand why you see it that way, but this is what makes sense for me. That is not arrogance. That is ownership. An intelligent woman doesn't need everyone to agree with her before she moves forward. She can handle disagreement because she has learned to trust her ability to think, learn, adapt, and make better decisions over time. She doesn't need to have every answer. She only needs the courage to keep asking better questions, because the quality of your life is often influenced by the quality of the questions you are willing to ask, especially when everyone around you is telling you to stop questioning and simply follow the path that has already been chosen for you. Trusting your observations does not mean believing every feeling, assumption, or first impression that enters your mind. It means learning to respect what you consistently notice and giving yourself permission to investigate it instead of immediately dismissing it because someone else disagrees with you. An intelligent woman understands that she doesn't need everyone around her to confirm what she sees before she can take her own observations seriously for a long time. Many women are taught to question themselves. They may hear things like, you're overthinking, you're too sensitive, or you're imagining things. Sometimes those statements are true, because everyone can misunderstand situations. Sometimes they become a way of making someone doubt what they are clearly experiencing. An intelligent woman learns the difference. She doesn't automatically assume she is right. She also doesn't automatically assume she is wrong. She pauses and looks for evidence if someone's behavior repeatedly makes you uncomfortable. Don't immediately ignore that feeling simply because they tell you everything is fine. Observe what happens. Does the pattern continue? Do their words match their actions? Are your concerns addressed when you communicate them? You don't need permission to notice. This is especially important when you are making decisions about relationships, friendships, careers, or your personal life. People may have opinions about what you should do, but they are not living your exact experience. They don't hear every conversation. They don't see every interaction. They don't feel every emotion connected to the situation. So you can listen to advice without surrendering your judgment. Someone may tell you they seem like a great person. You can appreciate their perspective while still saying to yourself, maybe I need to pay attention to what I experience. Someone may tell you that job is perfect for you. You can consider the opportunity while still asking whether it actually aligns with your goals and values. Someone may tell you you're being too cautious. You can ask whether caution is coming from fear or from a legitimate observation. That is mature thinking. Trusting yourself is not about becoming stubborn. It is about developing enough self-awareness to distinguish between evidence and anxiety. Sometimes your mind will create a negative story because you are afraid. Times your discomfort will be pointing towards something you genuinely need to examine. The answer is not to blindly trust either one. The answer is to investigate, ask questions, gather information, observe patterns, give yourself time, then make your decision. This process, trust, because you begin discovering without you handle immediately asking someone else what to think. You can sit with the difficult decisions of you can change your mind when new information appears. You can admit when you misunderstood something. You can still trust yourself after making a mistake. That last part matters because self-trust does not mean believing you will always be right. It means believing that you can respond intelligently even when you are wrong. An intelligent woman doesn't need perfect judgment. She needs a willingness to learn. This is also why she doesn't constantly seek approval. If every decision requires 5 people to tell her it is okay, she may never develop confidence in her own judgment. Advice can be valuable. There is a point where you have to make the decision yourself. You have to live with it. You have to learn from it. You have to take responsibility for it. And that responsibility creates maturity. Eventually, you begin noticing that your instincts become clearer because you have learned from experience. You recognize patterns faster. You notice inconsistencies earlier. You understand which situations bring out your best and which ones repeat a nobody person you want to be. You don't need to explain every observation to everyone. Some need a specific tech note. Sometimes you can act one quietly, step back. Sometimes you can quiet for decision, becoming answers. And a quiet time to speak, covering your grand sets of the list. Some you've heard now, you have ever going to be the excessively in the field where the removes, and if you're a lady, you've been on question, you know what's on over now, you're really just the way it's being and the girl woman. You was It is also about knowing when to pause, observe, question, learn, and trust your judgment without becoming trapped by ego or the need to be right, allowing your awareness to become a guide rather than something you constantly silence to make other people comfortable